Hello, everyone. Hi, I am Rosalinda Román. I go by Rosalinda, and this is my weekly live stream where I read a chapter of my book, my sailing memoir, Losing Sight of the Shore, How to Live on a Boat Without Killing Your Family. I read a chapter a week here on my socials just to kind of share our adventures and just it's been really fun for me to kind of revisit some of the adventures that we've had in the past, especially now that we are about to have new adventures. We are preparing to move on to a catamaran in the Mediterranean. These adventures all take place in the US and the Bahamas. So I just like to share that. I'm excited, nervous. There's so much to think about in the coming weeks, but that's a conversation for another day. I do share, and I will be sharing the journey of us preparing to and moving on to the boat in the Med. Over on my Substack is one of the places you can find that. That's rosalindaroman.substack.com. And here on some of the socials, I'll probably share too. Anyway, but today, what we're talking about is reading a chapter of the book. I try to do this every Tuesday at noon Mountain Time. So if you like this, come join, subscribe, and tell a friend. All right, let me get to the beginning of this chapter of this week. All right, so without further ado, this is Losing Sight of the Shore, How to Live on a Boat Without Killing Your Family, Chapter 14, Water, Water Everywhere. If you love the water as much as I do, then I encourage you to buy a boat and live on the water. It's an amazing experience to be so connected to the sea. But just because you love the water doesn't mean you want water everywhere. Water under the boat is good. Water in the boat, not so good. The reality of living on a boat is that things get wet, and sometimes, particularly during the rainy season, things get wetter than you ever imagined possible. When you live on the water in a naturally humid, rainy environment, there is very little chance you will get things as dry as you would like. Keeping food fresh is a constant challenge. Fruits and vegetables seem to go bad in the time it takes you to unpack your grocery bags. A cereal bag left open becomes soft and soggy before you pour a bowl the next morning. Like most aspects of living on a boat, it always requires a little more awareness and preemptive action to keep your environment pleasant, thanks to all this moisture. But there is a difference between the generally wet environment you live in and having water actually pouring into your boat. The former is inconvenient, the latter, a nightmare. The first time we discovered water inside the boat was right after we bought her. It always surprised me that these are the things that the surveyor overlooked. But one rainy morning, when I opened up a cabinet in the starboard cabin on the down treader, I could see water trickling down the back. Like so many cabinets on a boat, there was a removable panel to give access to the inner wall where the wires, hoses, and cables are hiding. When we removed that panel, we were hit with a fresh wave of mildew smell, which suggested there was moisture inside the wall between the hull and the cabinet. Finding water like that inside the boat is always alarming. My natural initial reaction is to panic. Then, once I calm down, I try to find the source of this leak. With a flashlight in hand, I stuck my head as far as I could into the cabinet, looking for a hole or a crack. It was impossible to see anything. I went on deck in the rain to see if I could find the problem, but there were no obvious issues. Now I was soaked and aggravated, so naturally I called my beloved, who was in New Mexico doing his clinical work, to ask him if he had any suggestions. Yes, in my I can't believe they sold us this lemon of a boat state of mind, I decided it was a good idea to interrupt my husband's job of saving people's lives to ask him about a wet cabinet. In hindsight, as I write this book, I can see why he saw the boat as a burden. Gratefully, at that moment, my level-headed engineer turned doctor sweetheart didn't express his justified annoyance with me. We had been married about 18 years by then, and he knew better, and asked the obvious question that wasn't even a little obvious to me. Well, is it saltwater or freshwater? I don't know, I replied. If you find out that, it will help you figure out what kind of leak it is. Well, how would I know that? I asked. Just taste it, he said. I'm pretty sure my response was something along the lines of, "Are you kidding me?" Over the next 2 years aboard the Dawn Treader, we would have a lot of conversations like this. Nathan would have an easy solution to whatever ridiculous boat problem or kid problem I was trying to solve, and I would respond with some kind of variation of, "Are you kidding me?" I'm embarrassed to admit, on that occasion, I did not taste the water, so it continued pouring into the cabinet until he came back to the boat. It turned out the water was fresh, which in that particular part of the boat meant it was leaking from the outside in. It took us a while to figure out what the real problem was, but eventually we discovered that the seal between the bottom hull and the top hull had deteriorated over time. This was directly below the deck drainage area that was designed to funnel water down the side of the boat to prevent it from pooling on deck in a rainstorm or heavy seas. Unfortunately, with that seal gone, it was funneling directly into the boat instead. Once we diagnosed the problem, we thought it would be an easy fix. Just squirt some caulking into the crack. Until I started talking to some more experienced sailors who were living at the same marina at the time. They taught us that if we sealed the thing as it would just trap the mold in and would never look right. Plus, it would likely start to crack in other places, and we would have the same problem on our hands elsewhere soon enough. Instead, the proper way to handle that job was to get a tool to remove the old sealant completely before putting the new material in. Of course, this had to be done when it wasn't raining and when we had a few days of dry weather to let it cure. This is a tall order in Florida, where it pretty much rains every afternoon. With the other cruisers' help, and after a very long, hot day in the Florida sun, we got the job done. Finally, we used a product called Damp Rid to gradually suck all the moisture out of the cabinet. Little did I know that this cabinet moisture would seem like a tiny drop compared to the water cabinet problem we discovered several months later. Every boat is unique, and each one has its own annoying quirks. The Dawn Treader is a French-built sailing catamaran called a Lagoon 450. And if you ask me, one of that model's most annoying quirks is the design of the two forward windows in the salon. The good thing about them is that they offer a gorgeous panoramic view. The bad thing about their design is that even though they slant outward, when it rains, all the water channels directly into the cabin. Even a sustained light sprinkle could leave the counter behind the couch soaking wet. This was a real challenge because we loved leaving the windows open at night, but most tropical places we went to on the boat rained at least a little each night. Usually this quirk wasn't terribly disastrous because most places we went were also nice and hot, which meant my sweetheart needed his air conditioning. So the windows were always closed. That was until the time we had someone who enjoys the tropical climate watching the boat while we went out of town. It had been an especially rainy weekend, which is saying a lot for Florida. Our boat sitter must have slept with the two front windows open, perhaps thinking that because they're slanted downward and have screens on them, they would let the fresh breeze in without the rain. On this point, our boat sitter was very wrong. When we got back to the boat, I noticed the wood behind the couch looking slightly waterlogged along the edges. To warp that way in the short time we were gone, the water must have been sitting there for a while. Having made this mistake myself a dozen times, I couldn't be too mad about it. It wasn't until later that night that we discovered we had a much bigger problem than a damp cabinet. The first indication was that the AC in the salon wasn't really cooling things down. When we went to investigate, we noticed a weird sound coming from the AC duct. It sounded like something was blocking the air from getting out of the tube. We removed the cover and put our ear closer to the vent. That's when we heard a gurgling sound. This was not good. By shaking the tube, we confirmed what we suspected. The air conditioning tube was full of water, really full of water, which prevented the air from coming out. We used a foam pool noodle, squirt gun, and a vacuum to get several buckets full of water out of the AC tube. Because there was so much water, this process took a very long time. Gratefully, miraculously, when we were finished, the air conditioning worked again. But before we could do our victory dance, we discovered that was only part of the problem. A nagging little voice told me to check the cabinets under the couch. We were pretty horrified to find they were also full of several inches of water. Seriously, how much could it have possibly rained in one night? We spent the next hour sucking up water in those cabinets. Gratefully, the boat was designed with a drainage well in the corner, which collected most of the water below the contents of the cabinet. This meant that while all the food and paper products were ruined, my bread machine and crock pot were not. Small victories. Thinking back on that episode, I literally laugh out loud. It is now one of those stories we share about our liveaboard adventure. The damage was minimal, and although I would have preferred to have our boat sitter tell us about the problem, I also know that I am the last person to throw stones at a glass house. As I write this, I am having flashbacks of the time when I was house sitting as a teenager and decided it was a good idea to paint my nails with red nail polish on a white shag carpet. Yes, I did fess up to the homeowner, who ended up having to replace the carpet, but only because all of my attempts to cover it up failed miserably. There are two reasons I choose to forgive our boat sitter for this very wet mistake. Number one, the boat didn't sink. And number two, I am not a grudge holder. Giving myself grace when I fail and doing the same for others, even if they don't ask for it, always feels like the best choice in my life. Without that, even with a dry boat, we would all be sunk. And that is chapter 14, Water, Water Everywhere, of Losing Sight of the Shore, How to Live on a Boat Without Killing Your Family. And yeah, it's really fun to read these chapters. I hope you enjoyed them. I certainly am enjoying reading them. And again, if you're interested in either the book or my Substack, you can check the show notes. I have links in there. And I'll see you somewhere along the way. Thanks for watching, and feel free to share with a friend if you've enjoyed this. I'll talk to you soon. Till next Tuesday. Bye.